From the liberal Northeast comes a lone voice of truth. Honest commentary in dishonest times. Think deeper with Juan Newsom. This is the Cure Radio Program. This is the Cure.
Hey, thank you for tuning in to The Cure. I'm your host, Juan Newsom. Tonight, I have a very special guest. She is an entrepreneur, real estate guru, political campaign guru. She has worked on both coasts. I originally met her here in New York, where she ventured out into real estate, and now she is in the great golden state of California. Welcome to the show, Miss Tamera Evans. Hey, Tamera, how you doing?
Hey, Juan.
Thank you.
It's so funny. I was like, this is like my brother. Like, hey, what's up, Juan?
I know. We've been through it, right?
Yes, definitely.
You're doing so well. I just had to get you on, especially your expertise as it pertains to this podcast. I wanted to dedicate to the entrepreneurs. There's a lot of knowledge you have, especially about home ownership, the real estate markets, the opportunity zones. There are things that I feel like my audience would appreciate, and things that we could pay forward. So I wanted to bring you on to talk about some of that stuff. First, though, before we get into all of that, you recently worked on some campaigns in California. I wanted to know how that was going.
So I was hired last year, the beginning of the year, 2019, as a chief policy advisor for Errol Weber, who is running in the 37th against Karen Bass. And this was my first opportunity to really work out policy and see how it would be implemented in a campaign forum. And it worked out really well. Errol was able to get on the ballot, and he did make it through primary, and he is now running in the general. I'm no longer working on the campaign because I had some really other great stuff that I wanted to do for 2020. But it was a great experience to work with Errol and just, like I said, really have more of a confidence about the policies that I'm putting out, and that people are responding to them, and it's something that can be a serious platform for a candidate to run on and really make a difference. So that was a lot of fun.
Now, he's a great young candidate too. That's the 37th district, am I correct?
That's 37th Palms area. That's the major part, Culver City. And it's Karen Bass's territory. So, she's an incumbent, and it's I wouldn't say that it would be the easiest race, but something has to happen. We need to have more representation here in California.
Well, not only that, even if, and I pray that Errol wins, but even if these politicians, especially these liberals, they need to be challenged every now and then, because for them, typically it's a straight sale from the primary, and then they get in the general. And if it's a district that's drawn, or it's heavily in their favor, California, it's just the way, we can talk about this, the way that they stack the election rules in California is pretty ridiculous, because you have that jungle primary in some of the races. Can you explain that process for me?
Well, the jungle, here's the, before that is, it's the ballot harvesting in California.
Yep.
That's the problem.
That's how they flipped Orange County.
Yes, and there is extensive amounts of voter fraud here in California.
Wow.
And I'm not trying to dodge the jungle question, but I think that it's even more imperative that we talk about ballot harvesting,
Mm-hmm.
because we have a lot of individuals, voters here, who are simply don't have the knowledge
Yeah.
to make a good decision because the information is one-sided. And then you have someone who seems official that comes to your door and says, "Here, let me help you fill out your ballot. And I'm just going to write whatever agenda that I want to write on it." And it has happened. And we saw that is what happened in Orange County.
Wow.
Now, there was other issues with people filling out fake petitions where you actually, someone asks you, "Are you registered to vote?"
Mm-hmm.
And there were individuals, they did end up going to jail, but there were individuals at libraries with stacks and stacks and stacks of blank petitions,
Wow.
and they were filling them out, with all of these different names to make it seem like these people were registering to vote. So California has a lot of problems, and the main thing that I wanted to just address, without going into, oh, this is corrupt and this is that, voters need to wake up, and they have to realize that they cannot just go into the booth or hand over their ballot without really knowing what that D is standing for, or that R is standing for, and what they have done. What is the track record of
Mm-hmm.
that candidate? And so when you have places like South Central LA that does primarily vote Democrat,
Yep.
and the children at the schools that you're paying taxes for, and the representation that you're paying for in your taxes, the children can't read.
Mm.
7 and 8 year olds cannot read. So when we go to the ballot and we don't know what's going on, we're literally on a hamster wheel of failure. And
Mm.
we're not able to get off because we have no idea that we're even on the hamster wheel. And we just
Mm-hmm.
go in and we say, well, I'm a Democrat and I'm going to vote Democrat, and I'm a Republican,
Yep.
I'm going to vote Republican.
Yep.
And you're not looking at the track record of the actual candidate. And that's where there's many facets of where California voters fail on that system. They are not educated on voting, and they're not educated on the candidates.
Could California be red? Do you see a red future?
Well, it was
Or
red. I mean, if you want to,
yep.
history can absolutely repeat itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why there's not a whole lot of money coming from GOP and other Republican national organizations, and it's because it's a hard sell, to try and flip it. However, because we're dealing with this silent majority, which I think is absolutely real,
Yep.
especially living in California and having these conversations with people, and they're kind of, getting really close to you, and they're saying, yeah, I used to be a Democrat, and now I'm a Republican, and you're like, okay, don't worry, I won't kill you, and yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
actually like Trump, you know what I'm saying? And you're
Yep.
like, don't worry, you're not going to explode. It's okay if you like Trump,
Absolutely.
and and so there's a bunch of us here, and there's a lot of support, not only for the president himself, but for the policies that he's
Yep.
putting through. Um,
Absolutely.
when we're not, we can actually see what he's doing in action,
Yep.
and see a timeline. And I think that people aren't that ignorant. They understand. And in California, I think that we can at least get a little bit purplish, but a
Yep.
full flip red, we'll really have to see.
That would be devastating
Yeah.
to the Dems. I mean, you're talking about 55 electoral votes. Now, it's something I think the voters, in the whole, I'm looking big picture. I think some voters are getting more sophisticated because of the way that information is being disseminated, like the internet and so forth.
Of course.
On both sides, this not just Republicans, or conservatives, but Democrats as well. So I do see there is if they're not ideological, and that's the thing. If you're not totally ideological, you don't have to be a political independent. But if you're not just driven purely by ideological means, and if you
Sure.
you kind of think outside of the box and critical think about not only policies but just critically think about yourself and what you believe in. I think the information age is good. You can embrace these different technologies. You can go out and look at the daily congressional record. You can
Yes.
go out and you can read and you can sift through the opinions on all of these sites and so forth. And one thing that brought that, not only the Obama election, but I look at the Trump election. I think, again, I think if the Trump election was not only did he tap into what the middle class was feeling, but I think the voter got more sophisticated. I look at the Kentucky race that happened in the midterms. Matt Bevin, he lost, but the attorney general got more votes than he did. I think it's because the voter is more educated. So, yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. I think that social media has played um, a major role in people having access to information.
Yep.
And I mean, it's no figment of our imagination. Trump won.
Yep. Yeah.
And
Against all odds.
against all odds. And so, and I think that because we live on the West and East Coast, it's like that we are in a bubble.
Yeah, we are.
The United States is full of 350 million people, 330 million people, and 300 and the idea that the West Coast and the East Coast pretty much run the democratic politics is such a disservice, because the whole middle of the country has a say.
Yeah.
And so what's happening on the West Coast and what's happening like in Iowa and Missouri and the Bible Belt and the Midwest, those people are voices in the United States.
Yeah.
And they rose up because they were realizing that the Democrats, and a lot of them were Democrats, that the Democrats weren't doing what they were supposed to do at all. It was a mess. It was a mess.
Republicans too.
Yes, exactly. So when we talk about drain the swamp, we're talking about both sides. Please, I'm not oblivious to what's really happening in Washington on both sides. But I think that because we get so much influence from the New York and California, that we think for any stretch of the imagination that the ideology is going to really be the front and center of I'm talking about this drastic ideology that's kind of growing out of the left, and I actually feel sorry for this group of individuals. And because they're gonna, when Trump wins in November, which he's going to win, they're going to be disappointed again, because they're doing the same tactics that they did during Hillary's run.
It's worse.
Exactly. They've taken that and done it times 10, and then they think it's actually going to work. Yep. And this idea that you're going to start burning things, burning the system down, and people in the middle states are going to let you do that. That patriots in the middle states are going to let you do that. That is just it's just completely it's wrong. It's wrong, and it's a losing platform.
Well, not only that, just look at, we talk about President Trump and how so many people that wouldn't otherwise vote Republican came along for the ride. The forgotten man, the Christian, absolutely. Right? The Christian, the Christian, the constitutional conservatives, the blue collar middle class people, whether they're white, black, or Hispanic, the gun owners. In Pennsylvania, you had over 100,000 people that left the Democratic Party in the primary in 2016 switched to Republican just to pull Trump across the finish line in the primary. So
Yes.
the forgotten man had finally had a voice after like 20 years. And you talking about bad trade deals from both sides of the aisle,
Yes.
whether they're Republican or Democrat. You're talking about private equity firms, whether it's, Mitt Romney and Bain Capital or Paul
Yeah.
Singer going into these towns and hollowing out the middle class. So it's the middle class and the people in the middle, as you would say, the middle states. They finally found a champion in this president,
Yes.
somebody that's going to go there, implement the policies that they've been they've been hearing about for 20 years, basically.
Yeah, and also Trump is demonstrating that it can get done.
Yep.
All of this nonsense that it can't be done, that we can't, we can never bring our manufacturing back. That was all nonsense,
Yep.
and people voted for, they felt that they had no other option
Hmm.
when Obama was running on that actually as a platform, as
Yeah.
a political platform, and people were like, well, I guess, it's just never going to happen. And it was just this defeatist uh, uh, a group of voters that were just like, I didn't vote for him personally, but I know a lot of people that just felt like they didn't really have a choice. But with Trump, I know people were a little bit nervous in the beginning because he wasn't a politician, and it wasn't,
Yep.
and he's so robust, and it's like, oh my God, what are we getting ourselves into?
Hmm.
Unlike me, I was confident that man was going to win. I knew
Yep.
if he ran, he was going to win, because he has a record
Yep.
for really building things. And so I think at the end, of the end of his term and his legacy, it's going to play out really well.
Yeah, it
and
is.
and people really, they did the right thing by taking that chance in 2016 and saying, you know what, we're just going to go with it. And that's pretty much what America is about. We take chances here. We take risk here.
Yep.
And
We
he
needed
kind
a
of,
risk taker. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and we needed a leader.
Yeah.
And who cares if he doesn't say things right? Is he getting it done?
Yep.
That's what it's
Exactly.
about. And
Exactly.
hopefully we'll start to see a wave of this mindset take over, because the other side is just, it doesn't make any sense anymore. Just doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, look what he's done.
Doesn't.
Look at criminal justice reform.
Oh my goodness.
Look at
Yeah.
moving the embassy to Jerusalem. How in the hell long
Yes.
have they been promising that?
Yes.
Look at, you know, all-time low black, Hispanic, women's unemployment, 61-year low. Look at the
Yeah.
opportunity zones in the black neighborhoods, in the Latino neighborhoods. Look
Yes.
at look at the fact that HBCU now has been made a priority in terms of funding. I mean, you look at all of these accomplishments, man. I mean, this guy has done more in 4 years than Joe Biden and the rest of those Democrats have done in 40 years. I mean, this guy is just
Yeah.
he's a straight shooter. He's gotten it done. And I have a rule when it comes to, I'm bad at predicting elections, but
Mm-hmm.
typically when a politician goes in and does what he says he's going to do, he's going to be rewarded with another term.
Well, and the economy. I mean,
Oh
even with
God.
the whole China virus and us getting attacked with that, um, he was still able to,
Yep.
see us through that, and those numbers never really dropped.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
they took a slope. Of course, we saw the V, but it was a V, and it came
Yeah.
back up. And
Yeah.
so he demonstrates his control over over economics, his abilities to improve the country economically. And so with that on its own, on its face, is
Hmm.
a reason for a second term. That has
Yeah.
usually been the course of American politics. But I do believe that there's going to be a lot of interesting things happening up until election, and probably on election day and a little bit after.
Yeah.
Um, and we can talk about that. But yeah, get
Yeah.
ready. But I still strongly believe that he'll win. no
I
matter
think
what.
so too. I think had he not lowered taxes,
Right.
and had he not had been on the path that he put us on in terms of deregulations of the private sector, I
Yeah.
think COVID would have been much, much worse economically, because you saw the numbers, you saw high unemployment because of furloughs and temporary layoffs and so forth. But you
Hmm.
also saw job gains after the COVID numbers started to stabilize.
Yes.
So, if he didn't put that in place, if he didn't make the economy a priority, and if he didn't act fast on
Yeah. And
COVID,
pivot and know how to pivot.
I mean,
Yeah.
he acted
Yeah.
really fast on
Yeah.
COVID in terms of
Yeah.
the response and, keeping people from coming into the country
Yeah.
and so forth. Like, if he didn't do those things, we'd still be in a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Um, uh,
so I'm going to
yeah.
pivot to I know you're working on a lot of interesting things there, and I
Sure.
wanted to get your take on because we touched on it during our conversation with Trump just now, opportunity zones for
Yes.
entrepreneurship. So I just want to get your take on the opportunity zones, and what as an entrepreneur or as a potential entrepreneur, how can I take advantage of these policies that are being rolled out?
Well, let's talk about first. I'll explain to you what opportunity zones are,
Mm-hmm.
and why they are such a unique. Um, uh, how can I put this? They're a unique way of building up the community that I don't think that we've seen before. And what I mean by that is, opportunity zones are basically a gateway to community wealth. And when at the end of the Obama administration, the Jobs Act
Yep.
was, you know about the Jobs Act. It's basically
Yep.
accredited and unaccredited investors can pool their money together, which before there was a whole bunch of red tape as to why they couldn't do that. And then through the Jobs Act, you have the opportunity zones. So opportunity zones basically are a way for investors to pool their money, people who have capital gains.
Yep.
They can put it into what's called a QOF, and they can purchase these opportunity zones that have been designated by the federal government, and they get a major tax incentive for doing so.
Okay.
So what I wanted to do, and what my arm of doing or being involved in opportunity zones is, I went into the communities and realized that they didn't even know what opportunity zones were.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really excited about them because I'm like, finally, we have private sector coming in, and we have federal funds that are affiliated with this, and then we have the tax incentives, and then Trump just, I think it was like 700 and something billion that was provided for opportunity zones. So there's plenty of money to be used in these communities. And then I would go to South Central and places like that, and it's like dry, nothing, nothing's going on, nothing's happening. And so I realized that, again, when you're dealing with individuals who have been taken advantage of for so long, and
Mm-hmm.
there is a lack of just normal educational curriculum, like
Yep.
reading, writing, math, and they've been at least 2 decades with failing schools. How can we possibly expect them to understand a complex policy, even if it's good for them?
Yep.
And so I wanted to create a program that offered the education in the community, and actually sat down in public meetings and talked about what it means when an investor says, I see potential here and I'm going to put my money here, what that means to them as a community. And this, for me, because I studied suburbanization, which we talked about, the Hulk and FHA policies that were a major failure, because Hulk was allowed to allow their appraisers to design these maps that basically redlined, and so this neighborhood was bad and that
Yep.
neighborhood was good. And that kind of never went away. They made it illegal, but it never kind of went away. And so the mindset that I also found, besides the educational part, was that investors were reluctant to go into these neighborhoods, but these neighborhoods have great potential. And so, through other projects done in Texas, Arizona, more investors and developers are starting to see that opportunity zones are a wonderful way to give back, and provide that sense of wealth opportunity within the community. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I've designed. I've designed the educational aspect, and then I'm working with two low-income housing developers, so that we can come up with more of an ecosystem. When we talk about how communities build wealth, there is an ecosystem that needs to be in place. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how are we dealing with children, the school-age kids? How are we dealing with parents who have young children that need daycare?
Mm-hmm.
After school programs have all been stripped out of these areas. So where are
Wow.
these young boys and girls going after school when their parents don't get home until 6 o'clock at night?
Yep.
And so we're not thinking about that. So that is part of a wealth ecosystem in any community. Children need to be safe. They need to be get the proper help when they're struggling in school.
Yep.
And we're Americans. This isn't some place off in Syria,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have the programming and setup that the United States has, the infrastructure. And so it is absolutely ridiculous that any child in America can't read. That is
Mm.
absolutely disgusting. And
Wow.
so I want to really get involved in the community, get down on the street and start talking with community members about what they need, and then try and work with the proper organizations to get these programs implemented fast. And there's no reason why it can't go fast, and
Mm-hmm.
really see some results, within the next 1 or 2 years.
Now you touched on something that was really important. You talk about how, you can provide literacy for people who would normally, normally wouldn't be trusting of the opportunity, or
Right.
be able to take advantage of. How is, in terms of, because I know with African Americans, I know a lot of us are weary of banks too.
Yes.
um and that's a major one, because I mean, my wife's in banking, and I worked for an investment bank for a few years, so
Hmm.
I learned a lot of things there. I learned about trusts, estates, and all different types of financial products. And
Hmm.
I find it in our communities, there's just so many things that we could take advantage of, and
Yeah.
increase our wealth and our network. How is that ecosystem that you're building? Is banking a part of that ecosystem?
Well, first and foremost is we need to be able to build trust in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And first thing is teaching them what investment is and how they
Mm-hmm.
benefit from it. And then we get into even something as simple as savings account, and
Yep.
why it's important to put a little bit of money away. Those are all necessary for people to grasp and grab a hold of, and then start putting it into practice. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
again, that's practice. It's going to take some time. Now, you asked me about banks. So there's Chase banks, and there's all kinds of banks in these areas, but the people within the community aren't necessarily their primary customers for loans and things of that nature.
Yep.
And there's reasons. You need to have a certain amount of credit and certain amount of collateral, which a lot of these individuals don't have. But believe it or not, there's a lot of homeowners in these areas that have owned their properties for a very long time. And so in that respect, there is aspects of the opportunity zone platform that offers revitalization to these individuals. And so that would be a segue that we would use, is working with established homeowners in the area, finding out what they would need to get their properties, if it's lawn service, if it's painting, if it's plumbing, what do they need to get their properties together, and then what's missing in their financial file, that we would be able to improve so that they would look good to a bank. So it's a step by step process, but we start at the ground level first and start talking about and getting people's palate ready for investment. And I have to share with you that a lot of feedback that I got from people of color and other minority groups was that investors were just white guys that were coming in trying to gentrify, and that's not the case. And
that's what they're used to.
That's what they're used to, and that has been the case. That has been the case in several, Lamert Park, that was first white, then it was black, and now it's going back to being not black. So
Harlem. We talk about.
Oh, we're gonna talk about Harlem, brother. Oh my goodness. But they did a number on Harlem so much. But yes, and there is a reason for them to fear, people just bulldozing and just coming in. But the thing with opportunity zones is the structure is set up a little bit different, and it also depends on the developer. Some developers really just want to see a project through and work with the community. And so those are the people that you want to introduce to the community so that they can see for themselves that, and a conversation can be had, a dialogue can be had with these gentlemen, or some in cases are women, female developers, but they can have this conversation. That's the first step, is developing a relationship, building trust. If they have questions, we can sit there till the cows come home and answer them, so that these opportunity zone projects can continue to grow, and people can really start to see, and mostly it will be for their posterity, so it will be for their future, see that these programs really do benefit and can create wealth. When I go to South Central, I see a colorful suburb. I see a minority suburb. And we've been so brainwashed to think, and that's from the Hulk policies back in the redlining era, that we can't see beyond what we think is the ghetto. And so, number one, it takes a person with vision I don't see the ghetto when I go to South Central. I see people working hard, paying taxes that paid into these opportunity zones, and they deserve to be able to reap the benefit, because they're Americans and they're taxpayers. And even for people who are there, I understand that there's issues with people who come here from other countries and their children are Americans and they are not. Listen, it doesn't matter. If their child is a citizen, then they need to reap the benefits as a citizen. Yeah. And if the parents happen to, benefit, then that's just the name of the game, and we have to work on our immigration policy. But we are not my foundation is not interested in excluding anybody. We're interested in building community wealth that includes everyone that lives there, and improving these people's way of life.
Yep. It's been my experience, Tamara, and I'm glad you have this approach, because there's a tendency to think that certain minorities will always vote a certain way. People really start critically thinking about their voting once they move into the upper tiers of the middle class. Like, because you're paying more taxes, you're feeling a crunch. You're paying a lot more taxes. You're paying, you probably own a home. You're paying more income taxes. Your kids are in school. And so you're involved with that. And if they don't go to good schools, you likely have them in a private school or something. And so people that are moving up the tiers, they are, whether it's blue or red, they are really critically thinking about voting, because policies are really directly affecting their pockets. If you're in the top 2% of the income bracket, you have resources at your disposal. You have lawyers, you have tax attorneys,
Absolutely.
you can avoid a lot of things just by, being the person that you are. But when you're in the middle class and you're feeling the crunch, you have that $500,000 mortgage, and you have that $20,000 tuition payment for your kid, and you're trying to save for your retirement. I believe I'm glad you have an organization like that, that are helping those out there take
Well,
advantage of this.
and to change this trajectory of that, because obviously anytime you own an asset like a house or
Mm-hmm.
something of that magnitude, you need to know what you're doing when you're getting into that, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Yep.
And you actually you have much more stability when you do have home ownership.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, there you touched on a few points, but it's voting is a very, very delicate situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say to your listeners who have been voting a certain way is to just check out the timeline. And I'm going to give you what I think we talked about this the last time that we did speak. Um, Timelines are important because they tell a story,
Mm-hmm.
and we have not, as Black voters, been given the true timeline of our voting history, and where that deviated and how it deviated. And I would really ask that people that are interested read Mike Royko's book, Boss,
Mm-hmm.
about Richard Daley.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Daley was in office for 32 years. He was a mayor of Chicago.
Yep.
But what's interesting about his story
I
is,
read that book.
oh, good. Yes. Okay. So, you and I are going to be able to talk about the Hamburgs and what happened when, now, mind you, let's even go back further, which the book doesn't say, but I'm going to say it, and people can do their research if they want to. By 1919, after World War One, and mind you, slavery was not far away. The war had been won, and people were emancipated by 1865. So it's almost this it's just a nonsensical thought to think, for any stretch of the imagination, that Black people that were just getting finished with fighting the South, that were Democrats, that all of a sudden they just became Democrats in the beginning of the 20th century, that they just completely forgot about the fact that they had just fought a war, that most of these people that fought in those wars were their close ancestors.
Yep.
They were very proud, and they were out, and no doubt that they were out of this slavery. There were still some issues going on with, we'll talk about, but they were Republicans.
Yeah, they were.
Black
Yeah.
people were Republicans up
Yeah.
until the beginning of the 20th century.
Yes, we were.
And part of that deviation was what Royko, he wasn't saying it, but if you read it, and that's why I want people to read it for themselves. When Irish immigrants came here, they were not able to get jobs because they didn't have any paperwork. They were not citizens.
Yep.
And so they were
That's right.
in very close proximity to other Black areas. The Irish and the Italians and the Jews lived in their separate areas, and the Blacks lived on the other side of what would be called, I think, the tracks, as it refers to in the book.
That's
And
exactly right.
because the Blacks at that time were voting Republican, and the Irishmen could not get jobs, and they were mad that they couldn't vote, they created what they called, one of the groups was called the Hamburgs.
Yep.
And they would go and they would violently force Black people to change their vote at the ballot.
Wow.
And why? It was to allow the Irish immigrants to be able to get in on the jobs that the actual leaders were providing, that they actually had promised the blacks if they voted Democrat, if they changed their vote to Democrat. But they were also beating these people. So they were under duress to change their vote. Okay. This went on for years and years, for decades. This went on.
Yep.
And so I hear a lot of pundits, and well, I shouldn't say pundits because I really adore these people, but people say that blacks just need to pull themselves by their bootstraps and, they need to stop acting like they're victims. Well, my goodness, if we look at the meaning of victim, one of the synonymous words is object.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if blacks have not been a shiny object for Democrats for decades,
yeah, definitely.
I don't know what we don't have to say victim. Let's not use that word if you don't like that word. But my goodness, they've been an object.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a timeline. So then after Mayor Daley from the 40s, because they were already forced into voting for Democrat candidates and weren't getting anything. They weren't. And in Mike Royko's book, Daley is quoted as saying that they would purposely have blacks come up to interview, knowing that they weren't gonna ever put them in office, because or any type of working environment, because they were racist. They didn't want black people working up there. Those jobs were for the Irish immigrants that they promised it to. It was cronyism and nepotism at its worst. And blacks have been victimized. And then you have L.B. Johnson, which I have no idea how black people can recognize him as a hero for black people. Read the Civil Rights Act. Read all the way down to the bottom and see how much power was given to the labor unions.
Yeah, definitely. Labor unions, yep.
Yeah, so the labor unions, and we can go on, and maybe we can have another segment about it, because it's a lot. But
it's a lot. You touched on something really good there.
Yeah, I just want to say this last thing. I want people of color to understand that when you come in contact with a person who's been enlightened and has decided to vote Republican, it's not because we're Sambos or that we are Uncle Tom. Stop saying that about us, because we recognize that you who continue to vote on this hamster wheel are not getting what you deserve. And you need to start looking at timelines and seeing where things make sense. This is easy stuff to do. And then really when you talk to a person who is voting Republican, listen to what they're saying, because this may be an opportunity for you to come out of the quagmire, because that's what they're in right now. And some are seeing it and some aren't. And I'm telling you, there is a way out. And there's a different way to look at politics, and there's a different way to vote that can really take you in a better trajectory. And that's all I'll say on that right now.
Yeah. Well, LBJ quoted, that he would have us voting, Democrat for 200 years. And,
well, yes, he did say that 100%. He said he would have it voting for 200 years. He took the fathers out of the house, which was a huge travesty to the black family. The black family was a unit up until the 50s. It was a unit. The fathers were in the house. They took care of the family. They went to work. Maybe the wife had to work too, but that was a 2-parent household. That was necessary.
I didn't understand how important I didn't understand how bad LBJ's policies were until I read the Moynihan report.
That's another great report to read if you really want to open your eyes.
So it's The Negro Family, The Case for National Action by Daniel, and he was a Democrat. Daniel Patrick Moynihan was a Democrat, and he recognized early on that those policies did not work and how they were negatively affecting the nuclear family in the black household.
Right. Well, and then another thing I want to talk about too, and I hope that we can segue into this, is this misnomer of systemic. that keeps going around.
Oh yeah, go
Systemic
ahead.
racism, systemic. What is systemic?
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at systemic, it's synonymous to organization. Um, it could even be a platform of some sort. And I'm hearing the argument that, the United States needs to be burned down to the ground because its very establishment is racist. Well, it's a misnomer to say that something that is systemic, that you're saying is racist, is the same system that is used to mitigate and provide a remedy to discrimination, racial discrimination specifically. You can't say that the system is racist and then use the same system to get out of racism.
Mm.
What people need to realize is race is a world problem.
Mm-hmm.
It
It
is
really
no
is.
different from disliking someone for the color of their skin or disliking them for the type of shoes that they wear.
Or
You
what
cannot,
class they're in.
yes, you cannot control what someone thinks or feels about you. And unfortunately, we have coddled this mindset
Mm-hmm.
that if someone doesn't like who I am, then they're wrong. And what we need to start teaching people is if someone doesn't like what you do or how you are or the color of your skin, it's none of your business. Move on.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not going to be able to stop that person from being that way. Okay, maybe easier said than done. That's fine. But here's one thing for sure that's been happening. You know that there's a timeline of racism directly correlated with the Democrat Party.
Mm-hmm.
There was no switch. There was no
Mm-hmm.
switch. You can't get a professor on this planet to say that there was a switch
Yep.
talking about the Dixiecrat bull
Yep.
crap. Okay.
Yep.
There was no switching. They changed the face and the tactics and brought some Negroes on board and said, listen, you handle them and we'll do what we're doing. But the same outcome has been consistent for Black people,
Yeah.
not going anywhere.
Yeah. And a lot of those civil rights leaders, a lot of those former civil rights leaders are prominent Democrats today. They sold they
Sold
sold us out.
out. We were sold out. And I really don't like conspiracy theories, but I will say this, that there was a reason that they took MLK and Malcolm X out,
Oh
because
yeah.
their dream for the Black family and Black Americans was basically what we're getting to right now with opportunity zones. If you
Yeah.
read through the opportunity zone synopsis
Yeah.
and the logic behind it, it mirrors JFK, uh, 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 a little bit of JFK, but mostly MLK and Malcolm X
It
visions
does.
for Blacks. And
It does.
so anyway, we're getting there. We need to change the trajectory of our young Black men
Yeah.
and women, to starting to have more respect for themselves and really start to put on that layer of strength that we know that they have, and stop thinking that everyone's out to get you,
Mm-hmm.
and start looking at the actual people who have stagnated your growth.
Yeah. 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 I think a part of that is, and this is just for me, we have this is my opinion, we have to go back to the basic food groups.
Sure.
uh, of course there's finance and economic empowerment, but just the family, and
Yes.
we used to be in church, back in those days.
Sure.
A lot, we talk about that Republican era where blacks were Republicans. A lot of it was because of the stability of the household and the fact that we were in the church.
Yes.
And we have to get those basic food groups back in order to improve the condition of the black family,
Sure thing.
I believe. So, man, this is good stuff. This is really good
Yeah.
stuff. This is good stuff. I love
Yes,
it.
it is.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, so what's next?
Well, the implementation process, I should
Mhm.
say, is underway. Uh, uh, we've started the development of the foundation, which is a bit of a process, getting the
Mm-hmm.
501c, because we want to be able to raise funds, private funds, for a lot of these programs to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that they kind of stay intact, and that they really have the desire of the community locked in. Of course, we don't mind to have a government program, but the
Mm-hmm.
more that we rely on government programs, the higher taxes can go, and
Yeah,
government programs really
exactly.
don't have that stability that private sectors usually have.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the next phase, and working with different organizations, some government, some private,
Yep.
to just start putting it out into the community. I intend to start a robust marketing campaign in December,
Mm-hmm.
or even if it works for December, because December is a short month just because of all just the COVID and everything else. So everything is
Yep.
really playing it by ear right now.
Yep.
But a worst case scenario, we get started January 2021 with a robust campaign, just kind of placing positivity in the community, getting them educated on what opportunity zones are, and then just really getting their ideas of what will be the best implementation of what the best opportunity zones will be for
Mm-hmm.
their community, whether it be after school programs, daycare, jobs implementation.
Yep.
We're really going to be talking with the community face to face.
Are there other organizations like yours in other areas? Because this thing needs to spread. What you're doing needs to spread like
Yes.
wildfire.
Um,
Because
so Promise LA Zones is a really good program out here, and what we need to understand too about each state is going to have its um, own programs tied to the opportunity zones, because the opportunity zones is a federally funded program. So it's not really a program; it's actually a tax initiative, but just for the sake of this conversation, the federal government is in control of opportunity zones and that funding, and then each state has its own ways of implementing. So for me, I'm there is no active support in South Central LA. So what I would tell people, that if they want to get involved, or that they know of an organization that would be good, simply reach out to them and tell
mm-hmm.
them that this look, I'm in this neighborhood, and things aren't working the way that we would like to see them work, and how can you help? And you'd be surprised of how many organizations are out there. Fuse is another great organization. They do a lot of work in San Bernardino here in California,
Mm-hmm.
but they also do great implementation of low income housing, school programs. I think there's even a tutoring program, if I'm not
Oh, that's
mistaken.
awesome.
Yeah. And then 826 LA is also another great resource for helping kids for after school programs too, and tutoring. So yeah, we intend to work with all organizations that are willing to see the vision and
N-
willing to change the trajectory of people in South LA.
Now, one of the things that I worry about, because you're talking about California, and California has some crazy policies. I worry about this opportunity zone
Yeah,
not being maximized at its full potential because,
yeah,
sometimes some of the things that are coming out of the state, the state
yeah.
legislature and the governor's house, it's very unreasonable. I know this could get us going on a different trajectory. Do you
That's
worry
okay.
about those barriers?
I do, and one of the reasons why I, really wanted to take poli sci and actually get a degree in political science was to be able to maneuver that
Mm,
and deal with the realities on the ground. Um, I can't say much about that because some things are starting to break down.
okay.
It's not sustainable for a local government to continue in dereliction. It's not going to be forever. And people, even with not a great education, recognize that they are not getting the support that they need. And so as an American, as a voter, know the strength of my voice and my vote. And so what I intend to do is go where the power is, and that is the voters. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Share with them what's happening, um, the good and the bad, and allowing them to really raise their voice, which is whose money we're using. We need to stop this mindset that government funds. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
That 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 is an
Exactly.
absolute lie. It
It's
is
our
my money.
money. Yep,
That's
exactly.
my money. And so when you start to share with people and help them build that connection to whose money it is, their mindset is going to change, and
Mm,
their attitude is going to change, and they're going to be more involved in their money and where it goes,
mm-hmm.
especially federal funds.
Yep,
Federal funds are specific taxpayers, citizens of the United States paying taxes.
exactly.
And this mindset that the government is in somehow, that it's the government's money, that is insanity that
They
needs
don't
to
make
stop.
nothing.
They don't do it. Yes. Well, and this is the whole kind of, and I this, I'm sure that people would argue against this, but I think that that's the whole socialist movement of let the government do it. Let the government, we're better at handling it. And that's been a lie. They're not better at handling things. They're
Yeah.
not more efficient. It's
Oh
not
well.
more effective. Maybe some programs are, but on the whole,
Military.
on the yeah, yeah, that is excluding military, because I'm a big time patriot and two-way supporter. But I'm talking about federal funds that are obviously not working, that
Yeah.
are clearly not working, and then people just assuming that that's just the way it has to be. So number one, to answer your question, is to get to the community, help voters recognize their power, help them see what's happening, and instead of leaving a vacuum, we fill it with new good information about
Nice.
how to build up their community.
Yes. This is
Yes.
awesome. This is awesome. So, how can my listeners or anyone else find your project and volunteer and donate and so forth? Is there anywhere they could reach you, or
Sure.
internet site, or just
I
right ahead?
I you can go to www.ozoneability. That's one word, ozoneability.com. And there's information about the wealth gap. Really, it's a site about information. And as we start to build the foundation, it will change into the actual foundation website. But it is a place to start to get good information about opportunity zones. And there should be some links on there, like to IRS, just to see that there is what the correlation is to the IRS and the opportunity zones and how they play a
Hmm.
role. And then anytime someone has a question about opportunity zones, there's a message center on opportunityzone.com, and excuse me, on ozoneability.com, and
Hmm.
someone will return any questions that you may have, with answers if we have them, or we will direct you in the right way to find those answers.
So you're working closely, just to clarify, you're working closely with HUD and the SBA?
The SBA will come into play when we are putting in our economic program.
Oh,
So yes,
nice.
at some point they will play a role, because people will need to utilize them to be able to finance their business projects. So that's all in the works. And yes, we are working with HUD, because I truly believe that Ben Carson has a great vision for low income housing, and how it should actually, how you can build a proper system that makes it so it actually benefits the community, and allows the person to not just want to stay there for 20 and 30 years, but
Yep.
wants to be able to lift themselves up in that circumstance, and start to build themselves so that they can maybe own a house.
Yeah.
There's no reason why that can't happen, especially when you've been offered low-income housing. That's your opportunity to be able to save and really be able to have the things that you want, really be able to access what we call our wealth tools. You know, all of us want to have Nikes, you know, all of us want to have Nikes up to the wall. But if you have a wall full of Nikes and you can't pay your rent or you can't pay your bills, there's an offset. And we need to change that mindset in the Black community. We absolutely can have stuff, but there's a way to do it that is sensible and gives you more longevity than just being able to wear a Louis Vuitton purse and a pair of Nikes for that one day of fashion.
Wow. That's awesome, Tamara. That's a good way to close, man. You've been amazing. I cannot wait. I
Perfect.
cannot.
Thank you.
You've been amazing. Thanks for coming on. We're
Yeah,
gonna
it's very
definitely
exciting.
have you back because I want to see what happens in the next phase of your implementation. Right now, you're doing, you know, the educational piece, but I can't wait until you get off of the ground and running, and you can actually see how your program is affecting some of the lives of the people there. So I just want to thank you for coming on. So
Yes, brother. Yes, yes. And yeah, and I, you know, anytime, and I will definitely, you know, keep everyone abreast. And there'll be new information on the website for people to just kind of see. Ultimately, we'll be putting the projects up on the website so that people can get a visual of what's happening. But that's all in the trajectory. That's all what we're planning on doing in the next couple of months is starting getting that process off the ground. Yeah. Perfect.
awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yep.
This is The Cure.